Good morning. We'd like to thank you for watching us for another edition of the Sunday School Review. Today's lesson is Bias Love, and it's taken from Genesis, the 37th chapter, verses 2 through 11, and verses 23 and 24, and also verse 28 of the 37th chapter of Genesis. And let us begin in our lesson. As I said, our lesson starts at verse 2, the second verse of that 37th chapter. And I'll just briefly cover the first verse. Now, the first verse basically says that the Jacob of the family, Jacob lived in Canaan, or the promised land. It started with, if you remember, the promise started with Abraham. We have Abraham, we have Isaac, which was the promised seed, Jacob, Abraham, Isaac, and now Jacob, which the lesson starts out with in verse 2. And it says, these are the generations of Jacob. And also Joseph, being 17 years old, was feeding the flock with his brethren. Now, we know how the lineage go: Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And now we're going to see in this particular lesson where the leadership is going to be transferred to Joseph. And in this particular lesson, we're going to see the family dynamics. And it's actually our first outline said family discord. And when you're talking about the family that Joseph emerged from, it was which I guess we call today a blended family. It was, in a nutshell, it was a really mixed up family. There was a lot of family dynamics going on. It was not a family that was in perfect harmony. And I'll just tell you at the end, now we're going to see the results of this. One result of this is Joseph came out of this a mixed up family. So just because there's a lot of family dynamics going on doesn't mean that God's will not ultimately be done. As we're going to see, this is just the beginning. We're in a new quarter. This is just the beginning of this study. But we're going to see how God's will is going to be ultimately carried out. Now, let's go back to verse 2 and read, explore it a little bit. These are the generations of Jacob. Joseph, being 17 years old, was feeding the flock with his brethren, and the lad was with the sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zippor, his father's wives, and Joseph brought unto his father their evil report. Now, just before we go a little bit here, as I said, it was a kind of a mixed up family, a blended family. Now, we know that Jacob, he had this love for Rachel, and his father-in-law, Laban, he tricked him. He worked so many years for Rachel, and his father tricked him, and he gave him Leah, Rachel's sister. And then they went back to the negotiating table and said, well, work another week and you'll get Rachel. So he ended up with Leah, then Rachel, and as a result, with each of those wives came a handmaiden. And in the lesson it talks that they were wives. So as a result, he had, for the sake of argument, 4 wives. And we see that's why it's mentioned in the lesson here. Now, the evil report, and Joseph, now Joseph being one of the younger, not the youngest, but one of the younger, and he brought his father Jacob an evil report. Now, it really doesn't specify the contents of that report, but in any regard, it did not paint the brothers in a good light. Now, the thing about this is that Joseph was concerned that we are God's people, and Joseph was concerned about the issue of justice, the issue of righteousness. So, and some may label him a tattletale, and we know people don't like tattletales. So that was possibly some of the hatred that the brothers had for him. And we go into verse 3, and we're going to see here what happens, and that did not, that, as he said, added insult to injury when we look at the treatment that the father, that is Jacob, gave to Joseph. And verse 3, now Israel loved Joseph more than all his children, because he was the son of his old age, and he made him a coat of many colors. Now, let's talk about this first clause here a minute. Now, Israel loved Joseph. Now, when they say Israel, we know Jacob was his given name, but his God changed name. God changed Jacob's name from Jacob to Israel. That's why I said in verse 3, now Israel, meaning Jacob. We're talking about the same person. He loved Joseph more than all his children. Now he had 13 children, 12 boys and 1 girl. And he loved Joseph more than all because it was the son of his old age. Now, there's a few takes on that, but one take is that since Joseph was one of the youngest, he had more time to invest in Joseph. And that could have been, one of the reasons why, his love for him, or the fact that he had a similar sentiment. As I said, Joseph was concerned about the issue of justice, the issue of righteousness, I guess more so than his other siblings, his other brothers. And he made him a coat of many colors. Now, that coat has other significance. I mean, this is a heavy subject, so we're not going to explore it in much depth, but just the idea, let me talk about this coat for a minute, is that it was a type of coat. It resembles, you don't see too many of them now, but like a trench coat, a long coat, a trench coat. And it had long sleeves. They said, long sleeves, what does that matter? Well, the idea is that it was not a coat of a common working person. It was more like a coat of a ruler or something of that nature. So the idea is that the implications here is that I am recognizing him as now as the leader of this nation. Now we know he's 17, but that's part of the implication. And another thing, as I said, a lot of this, some of this hatred that the brothers have for Joseph is of Jacob's own doing. Now, you should remember that Jacob should realize what favoritism, what issues favoritism caused. Because you remember the deal with his twin brother Esau, how his father favored Esau, mother favored him. And there were a lot of issues surrounding that particular arrangement. So Jacob, of all people, should have realized the danger in favoritism. But now let's go into verse 4. We read verse 3. And when his brethren saw their father love him more than his brethren, they hated him and could not speak peaceably unto him. Now, as I said, this favoritism, it was not done in a vacuum. It was in plain view. There was no hiding it that, well, yeah, I like Joseph. It was clear. It was clear cut that the father favored Joseph over the others. And let's look at verse 5. And in our lesson, the outline says, this is the second outline, a brother's dream. And verse 5 says, and Joseph dreamed a dream, and he told it to his brethren, and they hated him, yet thereof the more. So the dream that he had a dream, and when he told it to his brethren, they hated him even more. Now there is another there's an issue, a question that some people raise, and that is, was it wise, given the fact that Joseph knew, like I said, Joseph knew, everybody knew that Jacob loved him. So was it wise for Joseph to even disclose this dream that he had to his brethren? I mean, that's just a question, and it's debatable, and we're not going to sit here and debate that, okay? But that's just a question that's out there. And we know a dream is God do reveal things through a dream. So but we know this dream. We know the end of the story. But we know this dream is clearly a revelation from God. Now, not all dreams. They say we dream every night. And lots of times I remember some of my dreams, and sometimes I remember when I wake up, I forget them. And some people say, I don't even remember any of my dreams. But nonetheless, not all dreams are revelations from God. But this one happened to be, and we know this is true. And we go to verse 6, and he said unto them, that is brethren, here I pray thee, this dream which I have dreamed, behold, we were binding sheaves in the field, and lo, my sheaf arose and stood upright, and behold, your sheaves stood around about me and made obedience to my sheaf. Basically he's saying, well, yeah, we was out there, and a sheaf is like a stalks that you heave up, and they stalks of corn or something like that, and they stand up. And he said, mine stood up upright, and yours bow down to me. Now, I mean, he was all excited about the dream, but you can imagine that his brethren was not. And we go to verse 8, and this is what they said. And his brethren said unto them, shall thou indeed reign over us? And they asked him a question here. and shall thou indeed have dominion over us? And they hated him yet the more for his dream and for his words. Now, to be honest, the honest answer to question A is yes. But now, the one thing that you have to think about is that, yes, that's true, and that's the dream that he had. But we go back to the question, was it wise for him to say that at that time? And we don't know. Sometimes you say, well, the ends justify the means or whatever. But I mean, God is still concerned. I mean, in certain things we have to keep pride in check. And as the people that have said, like I said, there has been debates about this. As the people who have debated and said, well, no, it may not have been wise, they were looking at the fact that maybe his pride was it was a type of pride that like self, or self-centered more than other-centered. It's like, yes, it's true, but you have to think about how is it going to sound to someone that's hearing that. Like I said, I'm not making a point either way. I'm just saying that's what has been debated, and we understand the outcome of this whole story. Okay, so that the idea is that that's true. So Joseph, the essence of this this transfer is that Joseph is the one, not the other brothers. Joseph is the one that is chosen to carry on the heritage. Now, there has been many people that said that there are a lot of similarities. That one individual said that there's about 50 or 60 different similarities between Joseph and Jesus and the Messiah. Now, and I'm not going to cover clearly 50 or 60 different similarities between Joseph and the Messiah. I mean, that's a lesson in and of itself. Okay, but here is one here. Now, when Joseph was talking about his dream, and we know that came true because Joseph was able to save the nation, but for the fact that Joseph had been elevated to prime minister in Egypt, the nation would have died, and there would have been no Messiah. So we know this is true. We know that we know that to be true. So the idea is that when Joseph, it was good news for him. I mean, he was happy about it, but his brothers was not happy about it. His brothers, and we're going to talk about that just before we get into our next outline. His brothers conspired to kill him, just like they conspired to kill Jesus and was successful. Now we know they was not successful in this endeavor, but that is one similarity there. They hated him. They rejected him. The brothers rejected him. They rejected Jesus. Okay, let's go into verse 9. And this is another dream. Verse 9. And he dreamed yet another dream and told it to his brethren. Now, if you say the first one was, okay, well, yeah, maybe he didn't realize how they would take the first dream. Now the second dream, Now, you know, based on their reaction to the first dream, and it said, and he dreamed yet another dream, and he told his brethren and said, behold, I have dreamed a dream more. And behold, the sun and the moon and the 11 stars made obvious to me. Now, it don't take a genius to figure out, well, who are these 11 stars he talking about? As I said, there were 13 of them. There were 12 boys and 1 girl. So Joseph is 1. Okay, now the other 11, well, it must be you guys. So yeah, they knew. They knew who it was referring to. As a matter of fact, they knew in the first time he told them. They wasn't clueless then, but they hated him because of that fact. They rejected him, just like they rejected the Messiah. Okay, and now we go to verse 10, and the second dream, he told it to his father and to his brethren, and his father rebuked him and said unto them, what is this dream that thou hast dreamed? Shall I and my mother and my brethren indeed come to bow down ourselves to thee, to the earth? And again, the answer is yes. I mean, if you want to be bluntly about it, yes, that's the answer to that. So let's look at verse 11. And his brother envied him, but his father observed the saying. Now, in either case, in both cases, the idea is that, or the understanding is that the brothers as well as the father understood this, is in the fact that they envied him. It wasn't like, well, he's just talking. Well, they took it serious. They realized that's a possibility. And his father, well, he rebuked him, but he kept it to himself as he observed these things. It's like Mary. When Mary was told prophecy, she kept that to herself. Now we go into our second, actually our third outline, brothers disdain. And we jump now to verse 23 and 24. Now, in those intervening verses, I'm gonna give a quick synopsis there. Now, as I said, this is another time that Joseph is coming to check on the progress of his brothers. Now, I told you he wasn't a working class. He wasn't from the working class. He wore this nice jacket, and as I said, with the sleeves, and that indicated, no, I can't do no work. He said, well, can you help us out? No, look, I can't do no work. So he had on this nice jacket, this coat of many colors, and the brothers. Now this is before we get to verse 23 in our lesson. They had conspired to kill him. That was the first notion. Well, we're gonna kill him, and they had conspired to take his life, to kill him. Now, and as the discussion went on, and one of the brothers, now the older brother, that is, I think it was Reuben, he was the oldest of them. And the custom is that the older, in the absence of the father, that is of Jacob, that the older brother is now, stand in as the patriarch. So the older brother, that is Reuben, you know, they said, well, okay, well, we're not going to kill him. And they decide to put him in a pit. And Reuben's intentions were to come back and to retrieve him out of the pit. Now, and we know that didn't happen. The fact that Reuben came back and got him out of the pit. But, and then we go, that's some of the intervening verses, what happened. Now we get to verse 23. It says, and it came to pass when Joseph came upon his brethren, that they stripped him of his coat, and his coat of many colors that was on him, and they took him and they cast him into the pit. As I said, that was, they had already conspired to kill him first, and then they put him in the pit. And now, so they did. They put him in the pit. Now, the idea is that, namely, they rejected him. This is the same thing that happened to Christ. They did not want him as their king. Basically, you know, he's not going to be our king. We reject that idea. And we're going to get rid of this guy. And that was, that's what they wanted to do. And we see rejection. Now we go from verse 24 to 28. And 28 dealing with selling Joseph. And then they are passed by Midianite merchants, and they drew and lifted up Joseph out of the pit and sold Joseph to the Ishmaelites for 20 pieces of silver, and they brought Joseph into Egypt. Now, so we see one group, there was, Joseph was in the pit, and this one group, the Midianites, they came and they drew him out of the pit. And for whatever reason, that's why we're going to sell him. They sold him and they made money. They sold him to the Ishmaelites for 20 pieces of silver. And then that's how they brought him down into Egypt. Now, Egypt Egypt at that time was a world power. They was the most powerful nation in the world. And Joseph suffered as a result he went through a lot of suffering, but ultimately he became the savior of the nation. He became the savior. And let me talk about this, is that now just after, well, he said there was a famine. He said the nation would have died of famine. Now, once they came down in Egypt, found there was grain down there, and Joseph was now second in command. He was a prime minister, like prime minister down there. And Joseph recognized them right away, but they didn't recognize him. However, once it was actually disclosed or revealed to them that this was Joseph, now they became very afraid. They became very afraid because they were thinking that he's going to do to us what we did to him. But Joseph was not of that mindset. And another thing that happened in similarity of think of all the things that Joseph suffered, went through, but he never became bitter as a result of that. As I said, he was sold, taken down in Egypt. He was lied on, imprisoned, but he never became bitter as a result of that. And so when we look here at verse 28, the last verse, and that if we take this argument, like if you stack up a bunch of dominoes and you say, but for the fact that he was hated, he would have never been sold and taken into Egypt. And he would, and he worked for a prominent individual, and he was imprisoned unjustifiable because he was lied on, end up in prison. He interpreted the baker and the butler's dream. If he hadn't interpreted that dream, he would not have been able to interpret the Pharaoh's dream. He would not have became the prime minister. So as Joseph said, those things that his brothers did for him, they meant it to destroy him. But God meant it for good. Now, the one thing that we want to keep in mind, however, is that you may say, well, as I said earlier, God's will was ultimately carried out. And you might say, well, if God's will is ultimately carried out, it doesn't really matter what I do. But that's a foolish argument to make that argument. It does matter what you do. You're going to be held accountable for your conduct or for your action. And namely, God's will is going to be carried out ultimately. I don't care what human interventions there is. God's will ultimately be carried out. However, here's the issue. Do you want to benefit from that, or you want to be disadvantaged? If we go back to the story about Jacob with his brother Esau, Jacob, they all suffered as a result of the thing that they did. You can't do wrong as well. Ultimately, well, everything worked out good in the end. Maybe so. However, you do bear some responsibility, and you will have to be given account for what you do, and you want to be a benefit rather than you want it to be a detriment. So God's will be done, but you want to be on the right side of his will. We want to thank you for watching today. Join in next week for another edition of the Sunday School Review. Thank you.